according to our agenda, we're going to head over to the Wes Keller with the Nez Perce tribe. Wes, you ready to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. Great, you guys. I'm going to take the next about 30-minute time slot. I only have about 10 slides, but I'm going to cover just some information on the grant background. What is this grant and what can it be used for? I'm also going to spend a little bit of time and just show you guys some land ownership and fishery distribution maps. I think they'll be really kind of interesting to help kind of move the conversation, and then kind of cover the little bit of the structure and the flow of the 2-year time frame. So, we said this grant's for roughly 2 years. What do we think we'll try to do in this 2-year time period? And then just answer some questions if anyone wants to know, wants clarification on something I said. I would ask though, if we could maybe hold off, we'll have a time period to answer questions, and maybe I'll just kind of continue with my presentation and I can jump into questions after the presentation. So with that, I was just going to give you a little bit of backgrounds. And so hopefully you guys are looking at a picture of a map, and I just wanted to kind of go through. I personally, I work for the Nez Perce tribe. I've been working for the Nez Perce tribe for the last 16 years. And so I have been doing a lot of work. You can see here's McCall. I work over in the South Fork of the Salmon River and Big Creek, which a lot of you guys are very familiar with. And so we've been doing habitat restoration in there to restore fisheries for a lot of years. And so when you work in an area like that for a long time, you get very familiar with it. You start, every little creek, a lot of the landowners, the players. But recently we were able to get approval from Bonneville Power Administration, and that is who we get our funding from to do watershed restoration. And we got funding to move into the Little Salmon River. One of the things that became apparent is, even though I've lived in New McCall for 16 years and I kayak in the Little Salmon, I go hunting, look for morels, I know the area, but I really do not have, that deep understanding and knowledge that a lot of you have from growing up, and some of you are multi-generational in the Little Salmon. There's people that have been studying water quality for years or doing restoration projects for years in this watershed. So it became very apparent, while I do know, a lot about habitat restoration and the South Fork and Big Creek, I wouldn't pretend to know maybe the right answer to improve water quality in the Little Salmon River. And so that kind of started the grain of thought of like, how do we get everyone together to be able to discuss how we improve water quality in this watershed? And so, let me kind of move to the next slide. And so what we did is we started looking for a grant. We knew that we wanted to again, incorporate folks that have the knowledge and history of this watershed. So we started looking for grants, and we found the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Grant. So we were pretty excited by this because it was exactly what we're doing here. It was funding to form a collaborative. The funding is very limited. It can only be used for a 2-year period, and the funds can be used to hire a facilitator, which is we're lucky enough to have Gary on here, note taker, rent meeting space, and purchase supplies. The downside is the grant can't be used for on-the-ground restoration. But the good news is, because Bonneville Power has allowed us to move into this watershed, we will be able to use some limited funds to do on-the-ground work in the Little Salmon. So like Gary mentioned, the end product of this collaborative effort includes drafting a list identifying specific restoration actions with interested parties and resources to improve water quality in the Little Salmon River. And so that is kind of the background on this grant. Again, there's things it can and can't be used for, but I'm going to kind of jump to the next slide and give a little more background information. So I know a lot of you guys are very familiar with this watershed, maybe some folks more than others, but we've always felt that this watershed can be divided into an upper and lower assessment unit. And you can see that black line kind of dividing. And then the dividing line is kind of at Round Valley. And the reason why we divided it there is, you have differences in fish distribution right at this point, and water quality, water temperature, land ownership, and land use. And so the upper assessment, hopefully you guys can see my pointer above this black line. You guys will see the white, what that stands for, that is private ownership. And so this upper assessment unit is about 58% in private ownership. It does not currently have bull trout, Chinook, or steelhead present. The lower assessment unit, and again, this is below Round Valley and then also below the falls, is largely about 75% is in federal ownership. So as you guys kind of look up there, you can see the legend up there. We have the Payette National Forest in the light green. We have the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest kind of in the lower left corner there. And we have Hell's Canyon Recreation Area. And then scattered throughout there, you guys see there's again, private, BLM, and state. And so why is this important? Why are we showing you this map? And why it's important is, honestly, if we want to fix any kind of water quality in that upper Little Salmon assessment unit, you can tell it's 58% in private. We need private landowners. We need them at the table. I'm really encouraged to hear a lot of folks who are water users and have without water knowledge at the table here to help us kind of understand this upper assessment unit. Moving down to the lower assessment unit, if you want to protect the integrity of some of these high elevation cold water streams that are coming into the Little Salmon, that's you're working with the Payette for Hazard Creek, Boulder Creek, and Rapid River, and then some of the Nez Clear on the West Fork of Rapid River. And so, yeah, we have a good representation here. I'm really excited to hear that we have both federal, private, state, IDEQ, NOAA, and a lot of folks at the table here to have really meaningful conversations on this. So with that, I'm gonna slide and just kind of talk real briefly on the fisheries. I think, again, if folks have lived in this area, they're probably well aware of what kind of fish are in, but we're talking about the lower assessment unit again. And there are 3 ESA Endangered Species Act listed fish species that reside in the Little Salmon River. And they're listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And in the upper center, we have bull trout. That's kind of a picture up there. Lower left, we have Chinook salmon. And lower right, we have steelhead. Further, the Little Salmon provides critical habitat for these 3 species. And for folks that don't know what critical habitat means, it's basically the habitat that needs to support the recovery of these listed fish species. And so we can at a different time kind of go over where these critical habitat boundaries are. So again, I know everyone is familiar with the area. This is the falls on the Little Salmon. And again, these are fish passage barriers. So in 1922, when the construction of Highway 95 happened, the road kind of severely constrained the river corridor, and you have the falls there at the Little Salmon. 1934, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, they blasted 3 spillways into the natural rock and built head gates. And you guys, if you've driven down and anyone's ever stopped, hopefully you can see my cursor. It's really fascinating. Back in the day, I would love to have seen how they did these. It's amazing. But they tried to provide structures to allow fish passage, to get fish up into the Meadows Valley, where traditionally the fish would have spawned. However, this attempt for fish passage was really ultimately abandoned, and right now the Little Salmon Falls are fish passage barriers. So if we look at this map here, and I'll look at kind of show you guys the legend. The dotted line is Chinook distribution. And so coming from Reagan's out of the main salmon, they're able to make it almost all the way up to the Little Salmon Falls. I've seen people fishing up there. somewhat into Rapid River, into Boulder Creek, and into Hazard Creek. Steelhead, they're able to be further, have a better distribution. You can see they're up into that they're in the yellow. Squaw Creek, Rapid River, Boulder Creek, and Hard Creek. And then bull trout perhaps have the largest range, kind of going all the way up to the top of West Fork Rapid, into Boulder, into Rapid River, and then largely up into Hard Creek and up to below the falls as well. So again, that's kind of why we have those upper and lower assessment units. Very different water temperature, water quality issues. In the upper assessment unit, we have issues with water temperature, phosphorus, E. coli, and then that water quality actually will impact the lower assessment unit as well. But lucky we have these kind of high elevation cold streams, and so we start diluting some of that problem as we move downriver. And we'll have at some point, through this collaborative process, experts that can give you a lot more information on fish distribution and water quality in the Little Salmon, give more details on that. So let me flip to the next slide here. So what are the stages of this collaborative? We mentioned that this collaborative is for 2 years. What do we see as how this kind of progresses as we go through this collaborative process? And so I'm just going to talk about 4 stages and then kind of talk about the 2-year collaborative flow. And so on this slide, just stage 1 is what we're in right now. We were really reaching out to folks, and I'm really impressed that we have such a good turnout today and a good varied turnout. We want folks who have a lot of knowledge on, water users, folks, that have lived there for many, again, maybe new to the area or multi-generational, and federal and state and representatives. So we really spent a lot of time trying to reach out, and at some point when we get on a field trip, I'd love to hear how everyone was, if it was word of mouth or an email they received or how they heard from us, but I'm glad you're here. Stage 2, we kind of move into collaborative development. And this is where, as a group, we kind of decide, hey, what is our mission statement? What is our vision statement? What are our goals of what we want to get out of this collaborative? So it's not something we're trying to develop without you. We want to develop that together. And so that'll be the next few meetings. And then stage 3, discuss watershed issues and determine what watershed data is available. So again, I'm looking at some of the names. I know we have Idaho Fish and Game, who's we're going to lean on for fishery data, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality for water data. And then, I think there's a lot of other potential for folks to present on, maybe folks who have lived in the area for a long time, who can give us, information on the history, but the list goes on. And hearing from these individuals will help us better understand the decisions that we're trying to make, which leads us to stage 4. And this is to develop a watershed restoration plan. What we hope to have out of this, you guys, the end goal is a list of watershed restoration actions that will really help us, identify, what kind of restoration projects we're going to do, where we want to do them, and who would help partner, who would help fund these kind of projects. So I'm going to jump into the next slide here, and this is the 2-year collaborative flow. And again, we say 2 years, and it's actually a little less because some of it was, put into the outreach timeframe. But for the first few months, we're starting here in June and July, forming this collaborative and having Zoom meetings. And so the first 2 meetings will be Zoom, and I fully appreciate that it's not a great way to meet people. It's so much better to be able to shake hands, kind of introduce ourselves, have side conversations and all that. So August and September will be spent on field trips where we can actually get to know one another, have side conversations, and be able to, we'll talk about field trips later in the agenda, which would be some good ideas for these field trips. And then October through December, We will be looking for presentations from specialists on water quality, agriculture, fish and wildlife. The list could go on and on. But this will be an in-person meeting and a Zoom kind of hybrid. So I've rented out the New Meadows Senior Center, and we'll be having meetings there for folks that live in there. We figured that would be a good midpoint for folks coming from Riggins, folks coming from McCall, and the folks that live in New Meadows to be able to meet at that senior center. And for folks that can't join, in person, they would still be able to see these meetings via Zoom. So that'll still be an option. In January through May 2022, we'll discuss the goals and prioritize respective projects. Again, in the summer, some more site visits, and then kind of really coming together to finalize a list of restoration projects that we can carry forward into the future. And we know we're not going to be able to knock out all these projects, in a year or two. This is a long-term identification of how we make water quality improve. And so this will take time, and implementation of these projects will take partnerships, potentially grants, the use of BPA funds, the use of additional funding sources. So we'll be looking for those as well. But that kind of summarizes what we are trying to do here. And with that, I'm more than happy to kind of answer any questions, or if I spoke too quickly on something or something didn't make sense, please feel free. And maybe Gary, I'll let you know the best way to take in these questions, if it's via a chat or how you want to do that.
I've got a softball for you, Wes. This is Garrett Visser with Idaho Wildlife Federation. Great to see the kind of structure of the collaborative, but softball question is, the end goal is a list of watershed restoration actions. What do you see, and I guess the overall collaborative of what, I guess, defining what watershed restoration is in this instance? There's a lot of different forms of that and different goals and actions to get to watershed restoration. So do you have a feel or a starting vision of what that actually means for this group?
Great question, Garrett. And one of the things, kind of like I mentioned, if you were to ask me that question in the South Fork or Big Creek, I could go on and on for days on what I think should happen for restoration. But I guess with that said, before I would answer that question, I want to get a little further into the collaborative. I'm here to learn and really, we know there's issues in the upper watershed with temperature, water quantity, and things like that. And I'm here to learn on is there solutions to some of these issues. In the lower watershed, we know that there's a lot of federal ownership, and there are things that could potentially impact that side tribs coming in. But again, I'm here to learn and think about ways that people still need to make a living. People still have to get their water, and trying to find that balance and seeing if there's creative ways that we could do both, where we have water quality improve, but no one is losing, water. And if there's creative, solutions, that's really what I'm here to brainstorm with this group about.
Thanks, Wes.
She asked, how did you invite the private landowners?
It's a great question. And I think this is perhaps the hardest ability to reach is the private landowners. And so what I did is we, went old school and went down to New Meadows with flyers and figured some of the spots that, if folks maybe, not everyone's on the computer all day, a lot of folks are out working. And so, the folks that we kind of thought of areas like intersection, post office, some of the stores in New Meadows. And then a lot of it was, for folks that we all kind of knew that lived in New Meadows, reaching out to those individuals and asking them to reach out to their friends in Meadows Valley. And honestly, Riggins is hard too. I have some connections down there, but I definitely feel like this is also the time right now, I'm leaning on you guys to help me out. If you feel like, hey, I can't believe so-and-so isn't here, that they should really be at the table in this conversation, this is the right time to maybe send that website link out and say, hey, there's going to be another meeting in July, and please pass that out through word of mouth, because we didn't have a great answer on being able to reach everyone that we felt should be here. So we're in the beginning stages of that. Gary, no, I don't have too many anything else, but I'm just really encouraged by the turnout, and I look forward to good, productive conversations and varied opinions and diverse backgrounds and all that. I think that's usually what brings about the best end result. It's not your own result or your own thought of how things should be, but just a lot of voices generally, turn about a better product in the end.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Wes. Yeah, Holly Becker's giving you some applause on that. So definitely, I think the more voices, the better a collaborative is going to be in the long run, for sure. I think that's really important.